Catus, Maximus here. Just talking about older BlackHawk USA round head 3/8 ratchet. This was actually made by New Britain. This was before, I believe, Proto bought New BlackHawk, and then Stanley Black & Decker bought Proto, and so now BlackHawk's part of the Stanley Black & Decker group. But this is indeed a New Britain style ratchet, but instead has a different type of thumb switch. What I mean by that is this would be a traditional New Britain thumb switch. So when they did the BlackHawk said, hey, we want something that's just a little bit bigger. And so this is something I was found with just a bunch of terrible Chinese roundhead, just nothing ratchets. And then, of course, this looks just like any other roundhead ratchet. And actually was a nice little find. This one is not in the best condition. Pretty good detent on this ratchet. Does still work. Doesn't slip, but does have an issue. You try to reverse it, and it doesn't actually reverse. And we'll get inside, and I'll show you what's going on in there. One of the plates is not slipping, or this has a special kind of cross plate design, so one of the plates is jammed up from corrosion, so we'll see if we can't loosen that up. I do like the nice strong detent on this. This particular unit didn't have the best machining. We can see that there's a bit of play in there, but still using a slightly thinner spiral spring. So we'll go ahead and use a snap ring to help tighten that up when we put it back together. Of course, taking these little spiral springs out is pretty easy. You just find where there's a little edge, and they have like a little notch where you can try to work, in this case, a little precision screwdriver just to get under there and start to break it. And we can see the little notch there. Once that happens, you just use the screwdriver to help walk the little spring out. This one's really stuck in there, my goodness. And then that's all there is to it. There's our internal mechanism. Actually not a lot of rust in there, so that's not too bad, but it's definitely dry. There's our pawl. Definitely some clogged up grease. And then these are the components that appear to not be working. So what's happening here is when we're reversing it, it's not actually shifting the pawl over to the other side. So I'm sure just a little bit of lube and we'll have this in good working order. Alright, let's see how this works out. Shouldn't even have to do much cleaning. That's the beauty of finding one of these, is just hosing it down with some oil. And giving it just a minute to kind of soak into the components, or a second even. And that should really be all this thing needed, was just... Oh, it's trying. Still doesn't really want to cooperate. That's interesting. We'll just work it just a little bit here and see if we can't get this thing to cooperate. Well, as much as I've raved about these New Britain mechanisms, this is the first one I've seen that really seems to have an issue, but I have an idea of how to fix it, and it should be pretty simple. Even though I've really lubed it and been fiddling with it, still won't quite reverse. You push on the pawl just a little bit here, you can get it to snap over properly, and then when you want it to go into a forward direction, it does it just fine, but when you want to reverse, it doesn't work. And so what's happening is when you try to go in reverse, it appears that this little tab, there's just a little bit more metal here. This actually may have been a little bit defective from the factory, so you can see I've moved it over for it to reverse, but that little over center spring just isn't in quite, this top part isn't getting pushed over far enough to cause the bottom to kick over and work properly. So when I do it this way, when I'm pushing on the spring, it will work properly, but just a slight difference in play of actuating it from the top means that it won't reverse properly. It's just so darn weird, and all I have to do is just do that, and I can, of course, just press on this a little bit, and then it will snap over. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to shave a little bit right there, just so that this can kick over a little bit more, and get a little further over center when I'm going in the reverse, and it should make it a reliable ratchet. So it should be a pretty easy fix. Pop off the E-clip here and hope that not everything goes flying everywhere. Looks like a pretty stout E-clip. Usually you can just get these off with a slot head screwdriver. Of course, this one wanted to turn right in the direction of that hump, So now I can't. Now I think I've actually got it jammed, which is even more special. Use pliers to push that back in. A quick note, make the E-clip face away from the little riser hump, or maybe just a little bit sideways like this. Then we should be able to get this thing off without a lot of fanfare. There's our little E-clip. And then this spring is still going to be under tension. I assume we just lift this up just a little bit so we can get some clearance. Oh wow, it's actually fairly cooperative here. So I've never taken one of these fully down, might as well. So here's our top plate. It's just a stamped steel plate with a hole in it. We have this bottom plate which dovetails into the ratchet pawl. There's our ratchet pawl. It truly is just a floating pawl. We have the lower plate and that spring, which you don't want to lose. And then this is the spring that actually pushes the pawl out against the side of the ratchet. And so all they have to do is just have a little hole for that spring. Quite a lot of steel. It's really just an elegant and ingenious design. And how they're using this spring is it's just in there, and then when those two holes come together, it's actually taking this spring and squeezing it this way and flipping it around. And what's happening is it's just not quite getting over center far enough in order for it to kick back out. So all I'm doing is just making that small adjustment to the right hand corner of this, so that when I'm reversing the direction, it can move over just a little bit further to get it to go into the reverse direction. You do need this limiter because obviously if this thing swings out too far, it'll cause the little peg of the spring to fall out, and of course then the ratchet would be unusable. So I'm just going to take just a tiny bit off here. Alright, we'll take this tool and do that operation. We won't go too crazy. That's what's nice about these little grinders, is for little operations like this. That's probably all I really needed to do. Now that's going to kick over. I may take a little bit more out of there, but this should kick it over. Well, actually, we can see the hole. It's going to kick it over about as far as it physically can go. So we'll see if just that little notch there fixed our issue. Getting this together should be relatively simple. Of course, we have our pawl. We'll stick it right there. We have this funky little setup. We'll just drop the spring in there. This plate, we'll have to kind of fiddle around just a little bit to get that spring to... Actually, what I'll do is I'll leave the pawl out. Get out of there. Take the spring. Get in its little special hole there like so. And then drop the whole assembly in there. Now we've actually made some progress. Maybe rock it up so we can get this other portion. Whoop, before I forget. Let's, oh wow, come on now. There we go. Now we have the pawl in there. Now I've got to get this little thing over that little spring nub and seated down. I'm going to push up on this so I can get it just a little bit more extension. Just took a little fiddling using a screwdriver, pressing on the end of this to get that wire to poke up far enough. And we have now put our E-clip back on. Easiest way to reinstall E-clips is, of course, with a little set of pliers. That way you can grab the post and then the back of the E-clip and snap it back in there. Give a little bit more lube on this. And let's see if my little fix worked. Oh no. The little end of the spring is wanting to fall out of that hole. I've gone inside and flipped the spring around to see maybe if the way it sits on a hole, maybe actually one of the legs is a little bit taller and I had it in backwards. Yeah, it appears so, because now I have a whole bunch more legs sticking out where it fell out before. And look at that, now that I have it in there. Absolutely perfect. So look at that, it was just a simple little bump there. Who knows what originally caused this, because I'm sure they tested this at the factory and it would have worked. Maybe it was just a little bit of crud. There really was no rust inside this. So who knows, but that little fix, just grinding out, come on now, a little notch just to give it just a touch more travel, brought this back into total reliability. Let me throw this together now. And there we go. And I even put in the effort to this ratchet because I had I have Mustang, the Huskies, the Pencraft, actual New Britons, but I never actually had the BlackHawk branded version of the New Britain ratchets. Certainly a lot of oil in this, but that was absolutely perfect. Worked. Yeah, should have done a little bit more cleaning. We wouldn't have quite so much rusty oil, but that simple little fix absolutely worked perfectly. And the deal with ratchets, the old ones, if you actually use them, it's kind of good that you do use them, because when you lube them and stuff, all these microparticles will work themselves out of there, and then it'll eventually get really clean. It's kind of like, you know, your transmission fluid is really dirty, but if you replace it on a truly regular basis, then it doesn't come out that dirty, because you're not running it till it's so, you know, darkened. The same situation here. But I'm pretty happy about that. Just a simple little modification, and it works absolutely great. I'm more than satisfied with that. I'm pretty happy about it. And now a little video on how to fix that issue on these ratchets. Put in that snap ring. It's pretty thick. The anvil, there's still a lot of play in this ratchet, but that snap ring was thicker, and it gets it in a, you know, usable shape. At least the New Britain design does allow for a little bit of play, but that's always the thing, is there's been a lot of inconsistency with the end play in these ratchets. Probably the biggest issue with the New Britain design. But I do like the upgraded reverse lever. This thing just much easier to use. Just surprised that it just didn't want to reverse properly. That must have been something that just barely worked at the factory, and then somebody may have bought this and started having issues with it, because this is literally the first New Britain I've ever run into that would not reverse. Anyway, really appreciate everybody who's been watching and subscribing. And if you haven't subscribed, please do. Until next time, Catus Maximus out.